Okay, good morning and welcome back. I'm Heidi Copeland, publisher of Business New Hampshire Magazine, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to New Hampshire Futurecast 2021. What a year it's been. I was remembering the other day how I used to complain that I was never at home. Like many of you, I'd leave the house early in the morning when it was still dark out, head to Manchester. I attended many networking events after hours, and then I'd often return home well after the dinner hour. And the summer wasn't too bad, but in the past year, I have definitely spent more time at home than ever before, and winter has made the pandemic particularly trying. In fact, I was talking to my dog the other day, and I said, I finally get why you chew the furniture. So, but seriously, my husband heard me complaining a little bit too much and one evening, and he said, I've got an idea. And he took a map of the world. He's also a geography teacher, and took a map of the world and gave me a dart and said, you can throw this dart anywhere on the map. And when the pandemic ends or when we're vaccinated, we're going to spend 2 weeks there. So I said, oh, my cat's coming through. So I threw the dart, and it turns out we're going to spend 2 weeks behind the refrigerator. So looking forward to that. So welcome, everyone. Let's get down to business. This morning, you're going to hear from 7 New Hampshire business executives, and they're going to be sharing an overview of the year we just came out of, as well as providing a forecast for the year ahead. Each speaker is given 8 minutes. And this event will be recorded. We're going to post it on YouTube, and we'll be promoting it on social media once we have it on YouTube. There's a Q&A session after all the presentations are complete. You can write a question in the group chat, or you can direct message the question to our editor, Matt Mowry, who is here. And he's going to pull those questions, shorten them, direct them to one person if you haven't done so, and then we'll enter the Q&A from there. So let's get started. My cat is like, once I start talking, she starts bothering me, but here we go. I thought this morning I really wanted to start the program with Marshall Rowe. He's managing director of the Northern New England, or managing director for Northern New England of the Colony Group. And the Colony Group is a wealth management firm. But first, I always feel like Marshall has something positive to say, and I felt like we could all certainly use that this morning. And second, I like how he opened his article in the January issue by saying, the future for 2021 looks bright. So please join me in welcoming Marshall Rowe. Marshall?
Thank you for your warm welcome, Heidi, and good morning, everyone. My message this morning is that we should expect to see significant economic acceleration in New Hampshire and across the country as the vaccine is rolled out. And the increasing corporate profits created by the acceleration should support higher stock prices. We do not expect 2021 to be as strong as 2020 from a stock market perspective, but it should be a productive year. There are 4 major drivers behind the expected economic growth: monetary policies, fiscal spending, boatloads of cash, and pent-up demand. You might think of this as the perfect storm for growth. So if we could go to the first slide, let me start with monetary policy and be clear about the Federal Reserve's intentions. They want the economy to boom, and they are doing everything they can do to stimulate business spending and consumer consumption. Interest rates are effectively at 0, as shown on the slide to the left, and the Fed is putting $120 billion a month into the financial markets. That's right, they're buying $120 billion worth of securities every month, and they plan to continue that activity for a long time, perhaps years. And for those doing the math, that's slightly more than $1.4 trillion every year of extra buying power that's going into the financial markets. The graph on the right shows the amount of buying in 2020 versus 2008. These policies of lowering interest rates and increasing Fed purchases of securities are very important to continued investor optimism. And the slide shows that the buying in 2020 significantly dwarfed the Fed's response to the financial crisis in 2008. You should not underestimate the influence of the Federal Reserve in the financial markets. The second driver is fiscal or government spending to support and advance our economy. The CARES Act, if you go back to that first slide, that would be great. The CARES Act was important to our economy in 2020, and President Biden's spending plan for 2021 and 2022 will be equally or even more important as we exit the pandemic. Job creation should accelerate, and the unemployment rate should fall dramatically by year end and into 2022. Fiscal spending is a key factor that will support economic acceleration. If we could go to the next slide. It's actually, there's another slide there we go. The third driver is cash. The pandemic recession slowed spending and increased the savings rate, both for consumers and businesses. In aggregate, consumers have paid down debts and increased savings at an unprecedented rate. Contrary to the end of the financial crisis, consumers are in great shape with more money than ever to spend when they have something to spend it on. The other source of cash is shown on this slide. Corporations. Like consumers, corporations have hoarded cash throughout the pandemic. Data late in 2020, which is the bar graph and to the right, shows that in 2020, more than $2 trillion sits idle on corporate balance sheets. By comparison, this is more than double the cash accumulated during the Great Financial Crisis, which is the gray vertical bar. Corporate cash will begin to be spent later in 2021 to rebuild inventories, hire new employees, make acquisitions, buy companies, purchase equipment, buy back stock, and increase dividends. And all of those activities are good for the economy and for stock prices. The fourth driver, if we can go to this slide, that one, thank you. The fourth driver is pent-up demand. Consumer purchases, corporate purchases, government investments around infrastructure, and especially climate change mitigation investments should lead to accelerated spending. Interestingly, corporations are leading the response to social and environmental change in America. And investors are supporting and rewarding those new investments in our economy and pushing for more. As the data on this slide shows, the flow of capital to the sustainable strategies is exploding higher. So the graph to the upper right, you can see that in 2019 and then in 2020, and the trend continues to accelerate, more and more capital is being directed at those companies that are focusing on environmental, social, and governance good practices. The average returns on these companies are better than the average company in our economy, as the data in the bottom part of the graph shows. Investors recognize the value in good business practices, and the demand for those opportunities should continue to grow. Investing in sustainable strategies may be one of the best choices made in the investment community during this decade. Finally, digital technologies and work from home, combined with our favorable tax environment and highly rated quality of life, may turn the spotlight on New Hampshire as a preferred place to live, especially for more highly compensated professionals that now reside in Massachusetts and the tri-state area. As evidenced by the real estate boom that began in the spring of 2020, economic activity in New Hampshire is likely to remain on an upward slope. Quite possibly, New Hampshire may experience economic growth over the next couple of years, not seen in many decades. In closing, 2021 should see stronger spending and economic growth that supports higher corporate profits and continued positive returns in the financial markets. New Hampshire and the entire country should thrive as the pandemic recedes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marshall. That's very exciting to look forward to. I know the real estate in New Hampshire is exploding with people trying to get from other places where COVID is more problematic. I'd now like to introduce Brendan Keegan. He's the CEO of Merchants Fleet Management, and fleet management might not be something you're familiar with, but Brendan would say if you're not sure what it is, you probably need to turn to the millennials in your office and ask them how they shop. And that will inform why fleet management is huge. But let him describe what it is and what the future holds. Please turn to Brendan Keegan. Brendan?
All right. Thank you, Heidi. Well, first, I actually just want to thank everyone on this call for shopping more online than you ever have in the history of our country. So if we could go to my first slide, please. Last year really represented an evolution of e-commerce that was coming, but dramatically accelerated. And let me walk through kind of the three evolutions of e-commerce. So if we go back to 1999 and that time period, up to then, it was all about access. So it's hard to believe, but back in 99, it was about, do you have a website and can you buy online? I remember I was working for tech companies out in Silicon Valley, and we were literally building major brand name companies, their first website so people could actually transact. So the first evolution was all about access. The second evolution from 2000 to 2019 was all about availability. I didn't want to have to go to 10 stores to get all my goods. I wanted to go to an aggregator. And that's when Amazon was started as a book company, if you really remember that, became an aggregator, and the Walmarts and the Targets really took off. During that period, e-commerce went from about 0.6 to 10.7. So e-commerce, and that's the percent of goods in the US that are bought online. So it went to about 10%. And it's a lot of people think in 2019, just 13 months ago, way more goods were bought online than 10.7%, but that's all it was, because there were many things that we never thought of buying online. Well, starting in 2020, the third evolution isn't about availability, isn't about access, it's about speed. It's now, I need that good immediately. This happened to me back in September. My family, we were going to Nantucket for a weekend, and on Thursday, apparently I found out that I needed a Yeti for the weekend. I didn't know that a Yeti cooler was mandatory on a trip to Nantucket, but on Thursday night, it didn't become about price. It didn't become about color. It became about one thing. I needed it Saturday morning by 10 a.m. So I went to Yeti, I went to Dick's Sporting Goods, I went to Amazon. It was all about speed. And that's the advent we're in now, the age of speed. And when we from 1999 to 2019, it went to 10%. Last year, we went to 18.7% of goods in the US were bought online. So almost doubled in 1 year. When we look out at 2024, natural growth would have been 13.2. Accelerated growth would have been 20. We're going to see 30+% being bought online. So e-commerce, due to COVID and the changing demographics, took off, and it will be a forever change. If we go to the next slide. if we go to the next slide, please. And so, why is that? Why does that matter? Why does e-commerce matter to New Hampshire, to merchants, or to you? Is, fleet, we manage commercial fleets. When you're going down the highway, and hopefully you're getting out a lot these days, 1 out of 5 vehicles that you pass is a commercial vehicle. It could be UPS, FedEx, Amazon, the major ones, US Postal Service, we all recognize those, or it could be Joe's HVAC or Sally's and daughter's plumbing. So it can be any of those, but 1 out of 5 vehicles. Now, when we look at the entire supply chain, there's first mile where the goods made and gets to some fulfillment center. Then there's the middle mile. Well, at merchants and here out of New Hampshire, we run a very large last mile business. We actually started it 3 years ago, and we work with the big 3, Amazon, UPS, and FedEx. But as you look at the supply chain, what's becoming more and more important is that last mile, because that is the organization, that is the cargo van essentially that's getting it to your doorstep. And as I mentioned, it's not just about availability now, it's all about speed. So here's a question. So you guys, I'm going to let you participate in the chat room. So merchants, this company out of Hooksett, New Hampshire, that has a national commercial business, how many packages do you think in December our vans were out delivering country? So let's see if anyone's brave enough to put some answers in the chat room. Did we deliver 1 package a day, 100 packages a day, 100,000 packages a day, 1 million packages a day? All right, I'll take 1.5 million. All right, I'm going to give you that 3 million packages a day. We had over 15,000 cargo vans on the road in the month of December, delivering 3 million packages a day to people across America. One of the things we talked about as a company is, our commercial fleet was extremely essential during COVID when it broke out. Right through now, we were deemed an essential business, and our job was to keep America moving. Keep goods getting to businesses, keep goods getting to homes. And if I could go to the next slide, please. What we saw is this evolution. So we all know B2B, business to business, B2C, business to consumer. Well, there's a new evolution happening, and we call it B2Me. People want goods and services brought to them. And there's a few reasons. There's new populations that are starting to go online and buy, maybe some of the older populations, but there's also the millennials, which represent the largest group in our workforce, but also their buying power is increasing as they're aging and making more money, are just naturally buying online. So we're seeing this e-commerce take off, and as it continues to take off, we're buying not only new populations are in there, but new and different goods. So I think 2 years ago, many people hadn't ever bought groceries online. For takeout food, we're fairly limited to a few different kinds of food. Now, takeout is a mainstay of restaurants. People are getting food delivery. I know myself, I used to always go to the grocery store and get my water and get 3 cases every month and drink it. And now I just get it delivered on the 1st of every month. So there were all sorts of new goods. And then the third area, during COVID, a lot of services were hurt in that they couldn't perform their services. And I think what we're seeing now is between people valuing their time greatly, people willing to pay for convenience over price, and individuals wanting services brought to them, we're going to see an evolution of services being delivered more on site. Whether that's just picture a dental hygienist in the back of a Sprinter van set up, and they go to a company for a day, and they're in the parking lot and they take 8, 10 different patients as opposed to going into the dentist. And I could go through tons of examples that we're seeing use cases for. But in conclusion, a few things. E-commerce has crossed the chasm. It is now into the early majority. The speed to goods is the new differentiator. It's not about availability. It's not just about price. It's about who can get it to me the fastest. B2Me will continue to explode. And this shift in e-commerce is not temporary. When COVID goes away, it's not going away, it's permanent. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you, Brendan. That was great, and I thought of a few questions and received a few questions, so it's going to be interesting. The discussion will continue. Our next speaker is Patrick Closson. He's an attorney from the law firm of McLane Middleton in Manchester. That's a lot of M's to say this morning. And given the tumultuousness of the past year and all of kind of the ups and downs that businesses have been through in terms of a lot of companies thought they were going to close when we had the first shutdown, to them getting an infusion of cash from PPP loans. I'm curious what's going on with mergers, acquisitions, bankruptcies, and Patrick has a front row seat on what's happening with New Hampshire businesses. So please welcome Patrick Closson. He's head of the corporate division for McLane Middleton. Patrick, over to you.
Great. Heidi, thank you very much. And thank you very much to Business New Hampshire Magazine for giving us the opportunity to talk to you guys this morning. So let's talk a little bit about, what happened at the beginning of 2020. So if you could move to the next slide. So, we go into 2020 and, things are looking great. The economy is booming. And then all of a sudden, as we get into February and March, we start to experience the impact of the global pandemic. And then everything slows down. Everything slows down because nobody has experienced the situation before. Businesses don't know how it's going to impact their business, and everybody pauses as they figure out or try to figure out, what's going to happen. How long is this going to go on for? How is this going to impact my industry, my business, and my employees? And am I going to be around 12 months from now, 24 months from now? So we saw a significant dip, and I think Marshall's slides really showed that dip as we were going into the late spring. So from the transactional perspective, with uncertainty creates concern, concern creates stoppage. Everyone pressed the pause button and took the steps that they needed to take to try to figure out how you navigate through this period of uncertainty. We then have the stimulus packages rolled out by the federal government, which was far from straightforward. So we needed to figure that out. So as we go through the period of the spring, people are trying to figure out, what do I do with the stimulus? How do I utilize it effectively? And ultimately, is the federal government going to change the rules another time with regard to how these funds can be used? So that uncertainty, caused businesses to, focus their efforts and energies in places other than, it was really kind of a trying to save their business sort of mode, kind of a crisis mode, and took their eye off, growing or developing their business naturally. Moved to remote operations. For some businesses that was easy, some other businesses that was challenging. And then figuring out, if you remember, are we an essential business or not? Can I, have my employees come back to the office or not? And then how do I deal with people, through this slowdown? Now, interestingly enough, what we saw is, as we moved into, the summer, into the third quarter, into the fourth quarter, the economy in New Hampshire's economy started to sort itself out and figure out, okay, what's really going to happen? There are a number of industries that were incredibly, adversely affected and continue to be adversely affected by the pandemic. Initially, and on an ongoing basis, you've seen hospitality, restaurants, hotels, continue to be affected by, people just not going out and by lockdowns. But you also saw, the impact in the medical area, in other professional services where people were in lockdown and not able to go out and get those services. But as we move through the third quarter, the lockdown lifts and, the new normal got established. there became more confidence in the economy. And interestingly enough, things, in the business sector, started to, return to somewhat normal. And the pent up demand that we saw, from the second quarter started to play itself out, into the third and fourth quarter. So the activity in the M&A world started to pick up significantly. We have, in the third and fourth quarter, a couple other factors. Marshall, touched on a couple of them. First off, the pent up demand and transactions that were getting completed that had started before the pandemic. We also saw, low interest rates, and then, buyers who were seeing opportunities. People that were coming in, seeing distressed assets and saying, oh, I have the opportunity to take advantage of those assets and pick them up and add them to what I'm doing. And, I can make this work. So the end of, Q3 and Q4 was actually very busy, in the transactional and, corporate M&A world. We can move to the next slide. So, what's going to happen on a go forward basis? And, Marshall set the table perfectly for me. So what we're seeing is, a continued sense of momentum that's coming out of 2020 into 2021. People are seeing that there's vaccines on the horizon. They have a sense of, what industries are being adversely impacted by the pandemic, and they now know, okay, what the world's going to look like, in the near future. The low interest rates and the amount of cash that's sitting on the sideline is creating a lot of opportunities for transactions to happen as different companies look for opportunities, to increase profits and bring on other assets. So we expect that is going to continue. And there's really no reason, for that necessarily to change. We're also seeing kind of the impact of the change in administration. And that's really where the next level of uncertainty is coming. Where is the focus going to be for the new president, and how is that going to impact, businesses, and where are the new opportunities, going to, land at this point? So, as we've moved into, the first part of 2021, we're still seeing a fair amount of, activity in this area. And, we're also seeing another set of phenomena that is carrying over, from really before the pandemic started, which is there's a consolidation that's continuing to happen, in the large financial markets, with private equity firms that are raising capital, to do acquisitions. We're also seeing, two other, interesting phenomena with the things that are called special purpose acquisition companies. And these are companies that are out raising capital so that they can acquire companies. They don't necessarily have a target, they have an idea. And that's attracting a fair amount of capital. And we're also seeing at the smaller level search fund type companies where there are groups that are getting together, raising capital, and then looking for a business to buy, essentially the change management teams. So, there's all of that capital that in the marketplace necessitates or results in there being a fair amount of activity. So if we can move to the next slide. So what are we looking at now? So we're looking at a couple different factors, that are really going to, driving the transactional activity. There's a lot of concern about what's going to happen with taxes, and that's driving this notion that maybe now's the time, to move my business along, or change that structure to take advantage of some favorable tax environments. There's also business owner fatigue. Managing through a crisis is challenging. And, a lot of business owners are saying, hey, now's the time to move on. And then there's uncertainty with regard to the stimulus packages. There was the most recent stimulus package that came out in December on the 27th, PPP2, help for shuttered venues, which is helping. And, we anticipate another big package from the Biden administration, all of which is kind of lending to there being a lot of activity, in the business environment. And I want to echo, what Marshall said. We're optimistic. We think that there's going to continue to be activity, a lot of activity. And I think New Hampshire is very well positioned to take advantage of that and participate in the growth as the economy, continues to find its footing. So thank you very much, Heidi.
Thank you so much, Patrick. That was great. Again, got a lot of questions, but we'll let the audience ask those. As many of you know, the current CEO, Dr. Joseph Pepe of Catholic Medical Center, is retiring. But the new CEO is going to be Alex Walker. And Alex has been a respected figure in the business community for many years. And he comes to healthcare through a circuitous route. He spent 20 years as an attorney at Divine Millimet before becoming the COO of Catholic Medical Center. And he's also taking on Catholic Medical Center at a particularly trying time for New Hampshire hospitals, who have just experienced a lot of turbulence in the last year with the pandemic. So I'm fascinated to hear what he's going to tell us, but please welcome Alex Walker. Alex?
Great. Good morning. How are you, Heidi? Good morning, everybody. Many thanks for being here, and I'm excited to talk with you for a few minutes about what's right ahead of us in our future. And before I do that, it's probably instructive to talk a little bit about where we've been over the past year. Tough to talk about what's next while we're still in the middle of this crisis that has been with us for just about a year now. And so looking through the lens of the past year, I think is helpful. And it's taught us many lessons. It has given some of the initiatives in healthcare a much needed jumpstart. It's forced us to refocus priorities and look at our future in different ways. What the past year has taught us also is really the value, especially here in New Hampshire, the value of our hospitals, our 26 hospitals in the state, and our healthcare system as a whole. And there are example after example of why that is so. And for many years, as you all know, hospitals in the state have been anchors in our community, economic engines in our community, among the largest employers in each of our communities. Half the hospitals in the state are small critical access, others are larger community hospitals. All but a couple are not-for-profit organizations. So we all have missions that we try to live up to every day. And what the last year has shown us, and I hope all of you, is that hospitals in New Hampshire have been there for their communities in many ways. And we think about the incredibly heroic people that have been on the front line during this pandemic, our first responders, our ICU nurses, our emergency department nurses and staff, the people that clean the rooms here at the hospital, the people that swabbed many of you when you got tested. They're there every day swabbing and testing people. And these folks have done extraordinary work and will continue to do so. The hospitals in the state have and continue to fill many of the gaps that were there during this COVID pandemic. From having to source our own PPE to doing public health messaging about the value of masking, hand washing, social distancing, to standing up surge facilities around the state. Here in Manchester, we had a collaborative effort with the National Guard, with the City of Manchester, with the Elliott Hospital. Dartmouth Hitchcock, stood up a 250-bed surge facility on the campus of Southern New Hampshire University, who were incredible hosts for us, and stood up a 250-bed facility over the course of 72 hours. And we've moved on to testing our communities, and now we're in hopefully the last stage of this, which is kind of the vaccine rollout. And once again, hospitals have stepped up in a huge way to be there for our communities and for all of you as we move into what will hopefully be the the last few innings of this pandemic. So a couple things in terms of the future. What can we reasonably count on? Lots of things will remain uncertain in the healthcare market here in New Hampshire and around the country. I think it would not be an overstatement to say that telehealth is here to stay. It allowed us to make a major pivot with our patients relatively early in this pandemic. The entire healthcare industry shut down, like literally shut down on March 13th last year. And so as we prepared for what we thought was going to be a major surge of COVID patients, but that didn't mean people didn't need healthcare for other non-COVID related illnesses and conditions. And so we're able to overcome many of the obstacles that were there for many years with telehealth. Patient reluctance, provider reluctance, technology issues, challenges around reimbursement for telehealth. And so that changed in a big way, and was I think patients were very receptive to it. It gave people access to the healthcare system that at that point in time they really could not get. So look for more on the telehealth front. Look for slicker, more seamless technology, large and small. And one of the really kind of heartwarming aspects of what our folks have been able to do is just a simple iPad has been an invaluable tool for patients and their families when they can't be next to a loved one, to be able to have that connection, and we'll see a lot more of that in the future. The other thing that we're looking at as we think about the future is our physical environments. Private patient rooms for inpatient care will undoubtedly, be not just not optional. It's going to be an imperative. Infection prevention is, something that I know a lot of us in the hospital world have talked about it, and it's been a big part of our lives. But for the public at large, it's not been something that's been on people's minds, and it is today. So that means how we design our facilities, the ventilation systems, creating those negative pressure environments in our hospitals that have been so important for being able to stand up COVID units, and having swing space in our hospitals to be able to flex up and flex down, depending on what's happening at any point in time. And I would just say another thing to look for next year, and Patrick talked a little bit about it with mergers and acquisitions, and so the pace of health systems, hospitals coming together will continue into the future. There was a pause on it around the country during the pandemic, but I think you're going to see more of that. We've seen a lot of it here in New Hampshire. We will continue to see it. The other thing I would just say, just in terms of what will be uncertain, is this new administration, and what does that mean for healthcare? What does it mean for insurance companies? So that will be an uncertain piece of what's coming in the next few months. The good news is your hospitals here in New Hampshire have done a fantastic job. They've been there for our communities. We will continue to be there. Happy to answer people's questions. I know there's a lot going on in healthcare right now. So thanks for being here this morning, and we'll talk with you all a little bit later.
Thank you so much, Alex. Appreciate all that you do, and saving lives on the front line in the past year. New Hampshire has always depended on charitable and nonprofit organizations to perform many of the services that in other states would be done by state agencies. But the past 2 years have not been easy on this sector of the economy, from changes in the tax law that got rid of the deduction for donations to just what the nonprofit community has experienced with the pandemic. So I'm curious how nonprofits are faring under the added stress. And so we turned to Kathleen Reardon. She is CEO of the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits. Kathleen, you're up.
Thank you, Heidi, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here virtually. Heidi suggested an option this year to not have slides, so I thought it would be wonderful to talk really directly to you. This is my 6th time presenting at the Futurecast, our previously industry forecast forums. And I've always used this opportunity to really talk about a few themes. One is how integral nonprofits are to our communities, to our quality of life, to our social fabric here in New Hampshire. And 2 is, I've always tempered that with some of the unique challenges, some of which Heidi just talked about, for the nonprofit sector. And those themes are never more urgent than they were this year. We've seen nonprofit organizations step up into the crisis and respond with really dramatic innovation and adaptation. It's really fitting for me to follow Alex. As you know, the hospital community, those are part of our larger nonprofits in the state, as well as educational institutions. And we have a lot of grassroots organizations, a lot of small nonprofits here in New Hampshire. All of them really leaned into their missions and figured out how they could meet the community needs. You see everything from homeless shelters who had to quickly stand up new ways to shelter people socially distanced by working in some cases in partnership with local hotels who were suddenly more vacant. So really very innovative. And then more recently, they've been able to step up and quickly fit up new facilities. You've seen family resource centers and organizations working with families institute telehealth, warm lines for people to call and reach out. Crisis centers developed ways to create web-based private chats so people who were concerned about potential domestic violence could report that safely. So we've accelerated change and adaptation. Organizations dealing with youth and families have moved into sort of serving the whole needs of the families as well. And even organizations like arts and museums understood that as kids were being taught remotely at home, that there was a role for them to provide some curriculum and educational opportunities. So each nonprofit has uniquely stepped into the crisis and what our communities need. They've done so at a time when their business models are really being pummeled. Every organization has had a hit to its revenues, and certainly organizations that rely on earned revenues, whether that be ticket sales, tuition, or childcare payments, those were particularly hard hit. At the same time, and so organizations had to make some decisions about what does that mean for their staffing. The center every 2 years does a wage and benefit survey. And because of the timing of this year, we added questions on how nonprofits were impacted, what were some actions that they were taking as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we learned through that 26% of the organizations responding had instituted furloughs or layoffs. Many of them were anticipating that they could rehire in the coming year, but another 6% said they were probably going to have to institute additional layoffs. And we know that the people the human resources that nonprofits employ, that is how we power our missions. As Patrick has talked about mergers and acquisitions on the corporate side, it's a little different on the nonprofit side. But we are looking at that same benefit. 7% said they are exploring mergers or other partnerships. And nationally, estimates are that about 7% of nonprofits will close as a result of the pandemic. That national survey put New Hampshire 12th in the nation per capita of closures. We have seen a few high-profile closures early on in the pandemic, and not a lot more recently. It isn't unusual for that to happen a little more slowly. I will say many nonprofits are really looking at how they sustain their business. Many of you have also mentioned the stimulus and efforts that came in this year to boost efforts, right? So nonprofits were able to access the Paycheck Protection Program. I think New Hampshire fared very well, in part because we have such a robust community banking environment. And they were reaching out, as were our friends in the law firms, who were helping all businesses understand how to access these resources. So a good number of nonprofits received paycheck protection loans that helped them. And now they're navigating how do you make them forgivable, and do they potentially get a second draw in this next round? One of those things to remember, all of these federal resources are very complex, and many of our nonprofits have not received federal resources before. Nonprofits also were boosted by the CARES Act funding, whether that's through the Nonprofit Emergency Relief Fund. New Hampshire was one of the first states in the nation to carve out specifically organization funding in the CARES Act for nonprofits to access, recognizing their unique business role and place in our economy. So those were things, as well as some of the policies like the eviction moratoriums and the long-term care stabilization that helped boost nonprofits' efforts. As many speakers have mentioned, there's some uncertainty going forward. The recent relief package that passed had some additional efforts that will be helpful for a bridge for nonprofits. And we're hopeful that there may be additional resources as well moving forward in the Biden administration. Advocacy will continue to be an important thing for nonprofits, both on that federal level, as well as here locally. Many of you know we are going into the biennial budget practice. And of course, the state revenues are not as dire as we had initially thought, but there is a hole that legislators will be looking at, while at the same time, we are seeing increased needs amongst the most vulnerable population, many of whom nonprofits serve. I know our previous speakers were very optimistic about the coming year, and I tend to be the most optimistic person in the room. I feel like I'm a little less so in this environment because, quite frankly, the pandemic and the economic crisis has hit different populations differently. I'm sorry, my clock is going off and you're hearing that. But, you know, I take, for example, 211, which provides information and referral. Their call volume doubled in this past year, and they heard from people that they've never heard from before. The food bank has heard from people that have never had to seek their resources before. And we know that there's a tail end as well to the long-term impacts of the social isolation that we've all felt and experienced. So nonprofits will be needed more than ever in the coming year. They will continue to adapt and be resilient in meeting those needs, but they're going to need your support as well. I have more to say. I hope we have a good question and answer. I know my time is up, Heidi.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. I actually thought maybe that was a delivery truck delivering a package, or that maybe that was what that doorbell was, or it was the clock, but thank you. I'm excited to introduce you to our next speaker. There's been a seismic shift in the way people are working, and more people are working from home offices, which surely affects energy distribution. although I have no idea how. But here to discuss that, as well as Eversource's commitment to a clean energy future, is Joe Purington. And Joe is the New Hampshire operations president for Eversource. And please welcome Joe Purington. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, Heidi. And it is great to be here with all of you this morning. You know, Patrick mentioned that managing through a crisis is challenging. Without question, it is. I think that was well said. And, you know, Catherine talked about the importance of, you know, our nonprofits in New Hampshire for our citizens. And I think without question, again, you know, they provide valuable resources. And being connected here at Eversource with 211, understanding the call volume, and being on the board of directors with the Granite United Way, I see that firsthand. So kudos to all of the work that's going on out there. I think it's critical for the citizens of our state, and I know it's greatly appreciated. So here at Eversource, you know, in these unprecedented times, with many working, educating, and simply staying safe at home during this pandemic, you know, we recognize that providing reliable energy service for our communities is more important than ever. And at the onset of the pandemic, you know, we treated this as a large-scale emergency response event focused on our business continuity plans. You know, similar to, you know, weather events, you know, we have business continuity plans that are in place. And our top priorities throughout this pandemic have been employee and public safety. And without question, 2020 was a transformational year for all of us, including the electric utilities. And being in the utility business for, you know, 30 plus years now, seeing the transformational change that occurred in 2020 with just how we run the business, you know, using remote work models with our folks and our field employees, you know, in the field doing the work, was just, you know, an incredible change for us. And we've adapted very well during the pandemic. And I'm very pleased to say that we were able to execute all of our work plans for 2020, despite all the challenges that we encountered. Now, while we're all preoccupied with adjusting to life and business in this pandemic, as I mentioned, our employees are meeting the challenge of ensuring a future of cost-effective, reliable energy for all of the homes and businesses and municipalities that we serve, and a future that also satisfies, you know, the environmental expectations that we have. So if we could move to the next slide, please. So with traditional fossil fuel generators increasingly being retired throughout New England, and I mentioned this last year, you know, at my presentation, there's still a significant challenge of siting additional natural gas pipelines. And our commitment to a clean, reliable energy future for New Hampshire and New England has never been greater. For 2021 and beyond, we see a clean energy future that will include plans for cost-effective solutions to generate electricity, like wind power, as well as ever-growing number of local clean energy solutions. And as a centerpiece of our commitment to a clean energy future, we're dedicating ourselves to an ambitious but attainable target to be carbon neutral by 2030, and to help our customers in our region reduce their carbon footprint through a growing number of money-saving energy efficiency programs. So if we can go to the next slide, Heidi, thank you. So we are partnering with Ørsted, the largest and most successful operator of offshore turbines in the world, to develop 4,000 megawatts of offshore wind turbines off the south coast of New England. The Eversource Ørsted partnership ranks as North America's largest offshore wind developer. And we're the right people to be involved because we have a lot of expertise in building and operating the transmission systems in New England, while Ørsted has a lot of experience developing offshore tracks and building wind turbines. So our skills very much complement each other. Our leadership includes 1,700 megawatts of state level commitments through our proposed South Fork Wind, Sunrise Wind, and Revolution Wind projects. We're working through the siting and permitting process for these commitments while evaluating additional opportunities. And while the pandemic has slowed down the process for siting and permitting in 2020, we're back on track and we're trying to make up ground to get those projects, in construction. In addition to being a major source of clean energy, we view offshore wind as a potential to develop into a new industry for New England and the country, with 160,000 new jobs by 2050 and a private sector investment of potentially $70 billion, and that's according to the U.S. Department of Energy. So you might ask why we are championing offshore wind and how it can benefit New Hampshire. We see offshore wind as an ample, cost-effective, reliable, clean energy solution that can be integrated into the electric grid to help power New Hampshire and the region's homes and businesses for many years to come. So if we can move to the next slide. But we aren't waiting for tomorrow to provide New Hampshire with better electric service. Strategic investments in our existing system are addressing key areas of growth and improving reliability throughout New Hampshire, such as a recently completed Seacoast Reliability Project. Meanwhile, our investments in aging infrastructure replacement and system automation are also helping our electric system to better stand up to the harsh New England weather and reduce outage times. Eversource customers have higher than ever expectations that we will not only be there when they need us during the COVID-19, but also to be a leader in stewarding the environment and advancing the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals. While we are fully committed to meeting those expectations, we are also committed to providing New Hampshire businesses and homeowners lower energy costs while ensuring reliability for today and the needs of the future. It will take us working together to make that happen, and we welcome collaboration with business and legislative leaders in developing and promoting thoughtful energy policies that will help continue to make New Hampshire a great place in which to stay, work, and play. And Heidi, I think that should be my last slide. So I'll conclude there.
Thank you so much, Joe. That's great. And I'm excited to what the future holds, and saw that a question already came in for that. So for you. And now for our final speaker. Lisa Hinson-Hatz is the Director of Vocational Rehabilitation at the state, part of the Dept of Education. The goal of this organization is to help New Hampshire citizens with disabilities find suitable employment. The 30th anniversary of the ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act, was this past summer of 2020. And at the time, Lisa was quoted as saying, "I believe the ADA paved the way for a lot of businesses to actually invest in their workplaces so that every employee can have equal access." If you're open to thinking differently about your workforce, then you're really going to love what Lisa's going to talk to us about today. So please welcome Lisa Hinson-Hatz.
Thanks, Heidi. I definitely win the award today for the worst picture. I want to thank all the other presenters. You had great pictures. I'm going to keep my talk fairly short, hopefully under 8 minutes, because I know there's a lot of really important questions for the business partners here. Couple of things. First, Heidi, thank you for including New Hampshire Voc Rehab in this conversation. It's truly important, and it is a critical time. I'm here to support businesses in a couple of ways. One is to help individuals with disabilities achieve the training and services that they need to be successful in your business. And I'm also here to help your businesses if you're needing to fill workforce needs, to be fully prepared in that way. So bringing in individuals with disabilities is an untapped labor pool for certain. At any given time, our agency is working with about 3,000 individuals that have all sorts of interests in all of our sectors and all of our businesses. And I was listening very closely to the e-commerce needs and all sorts of those pieces so that we can help your businesses fulfill all your workforce needs. There's a few specific things that I think we can really do to partner with you. The first is providing on-the-job training opportunities. Voc Rehab can actually pay your business to train folks. So everyone's time is valuable, right? Time is money. We know that as a partner with you. And so, you know, if there is a position that you feel an on-the-job training would be appropriate for, we can certainly help there. I think the other thing that we saw a lot this last year with businesses, because everyone is so desperate to keep their employees, we saw a lot of need for retention services. So you have individuals working within your companies that are aging and they're developing disabilities, whether it be you know, needing hearing aids, needing worksite accommodations, whatever that need may be. We can help with those issues with you and with your current employees. The other way that I think we can really partner with our business partners here in New Hampshire is we have some training services, if you will, sort of educational trainings that we can do for your managers to help understand how they can best hire, train, and retain employees with disabilities. A lot of people say to me, well, isn't it more complicated? Isn't it, you know, there's all this technology. Well, fortunately, right now we're in 2021 and we're in a time where we're all using technology. Kudos to Business New Hampshire for using Zoom this morning. Zoom is one of the most accessible platforms for these virtual meetings. And so I want to thank you for that, because my staff were easily able to get into this presentation today. But we can provide disability etiquette services and programs to your managers, to your supervisors, and help you fill some of your most critical business needs. So consider us. I guess that's really my ask to businesses, is reach out to VR. And I'll put my cell phone number in the chat. If you even just want to explore ways that we could connect either on current staff that you have within your business, or if you're interested in bringing new folks on. The other thing that we're trying to do sort of behind the scenes is obviously upgrade the skills of our customers. And we're really looking to business to tell us what that means. So, you know, do they need a certificate program? Do they need soft skills training? What are those sort of critical training needs for them today? Again, I think I'll just end with one thing, is that every year we have an Employment Leadership Awards, and we're very fortunate to partner with Business New Hampshire Magazine, with Heidi and Matt and Christine and her team, to recognize our business partners that do this so well. And I would love to have you guys recognize either your business or any of your business friends, if you feel that they're really doing this well. So think about that. We do that in October of every year, which is Disability Employment Awareness Month. So you've got time, although before we know it, it'll be October. Not that I want to wish away summer or anything. But I just want to thank you for letting me be the bookend today. And I just appreciate the hard work that all of our businesses have done during such a challenging time. So thanks for having me, and I'll put my cell phone in the chat. Call us if you want to consider working with our agency. Thanks again. I'm looking forward to 2021.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I believe Christine is going to unmute the presenters, and I'm going to start asking questions. So I can't actually see if you're all there. So I am going to direct them to individuals, but I'm going to start with Alex Walker. And have hospitals in New Hampshire, so there was a big financial impact last spring for New Hampshire hospitals. Have New Hampshire hospitals been able to recover financially from the strain of the early shutdowns? And anyway, I'll leave it there. But Alex?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, you know, the crisis last year, like I said during my presentation, started, you know, March 13, when we like literally shut down the entire system around the state, stopped all elective procedures, stopped primary care visits. And we didn't know how long that was going to last. And so our immediate issue financially was just a cash problem. We needed to build a liquidity bridge to get us to the other side of this pandemic, not knowing how long it was going to last. And kind of the, you know, living to fight another day was really what we were up against. And so, you know, going into this with, you know, solid financial footing, certainly really helpful. And those hospitals that didn't have that really struggled. And so we started to reopen procedures the first week of May, working with, you know, the governor and his team to really start to we flipped a switch to turn it off, and it was more like a dimmer switch, kind of turning it back on and getting people back in to see their providers for those elective procedures. And elective is a bit of a misnomer. It doesn't mean frivolous. It only means that it can be scheduled. And so, you know, an open heart procedure is sometimes, oftentimes elective in the sense that it can be scheduled. And so just getting folks back into the system, moving back towards kind of pre-COVID levels of business took many months, and we had some help along the way from the federal government. Not as much as we would like here in New Hampshire, and certainly not as much as we wanted here in the city of Manchester. Between CMC and the Elliott, we saw we saw over 2/3 of the COVID patients in New Hampshire and received 8-9% of the federal funding that came to New Hampshire. So that's a whole nother story. Bottom line, to answer your question, yes, we're back pretty close to pre-COVID levels of business. The financial crisis has subsided. We did build a cash bridge to get us through a liquidity crisis. And now it's really just, you know, month to month, you know, getting back to a point where, you know, we are, you know, making a margin. Margins in healthcare have never been huge. We make a 3% margin, 4% margin in a year at a hospital. That's a happy day. So long-winded response. We could do a whole seminar on the financial issues in healthcare, but it's a great question.
Thank you, Alex. My next question is for Joe Purington from Eversource. And I'm curious, it's interesting, the New Hampshire legislature has gone, in-state has gone completely Republican. Federal has gone completely Democratic. Is there any legislation, either statewide or federal, that Eversource is looking at, and how that could affect you in 2021?
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. So there's all kinds of legislation that's going on. And Donna Gamache is, I think she's on the phone call with us today from our Government Affairs Division. But, legislation on, net metering is always, a hot topic, and one of the things that, we're cautiously watching to see the impact on our customers. So I would say there's numerous bills, Heidi, that we have our eye on and that we participate, with our legislators, and we have a good working relationship with them on that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to McLane Middleton. I can't see you on there, but I'm hoping you're still here. You mentioned mergers and acquisitions, and I'm not sure you delve into this, but for business closures, if a business is looking at shuttering, are there any mistakes that they should really avoid? Patrick?
Yeah, well, we certainly don't like to talk about business closures, but when we're forced to, absolutely. So, the biggest risk that people have is that they just don't organize, the method by which they, walk away from their business. And really taking the steps necessary and talking to other advisors, frankly, to help them through that process. The primary obligations or keys are you want to make sure that you're trying to satisfy all the obligations of the business, and frankly, that you're paying those and satisfying those to the best of your abilities, and that as a business owner, you're not taking funds out of the business and sacrificing your ability to pay creditors that you might owe. There's certainly more sophisticated processes through the bankruptcy process that can provide protection to business owners they're looking at a situation and think that they may be able to restructure their situation. So that's something to consider. There's also personal bankruptcy, to help protect people's interests so they can, restart their lives after they've gone through that situation. But I think, fundamentally, the advice I'd give people is one, get in touch with somebody who knows what they're talking about, whether it's a lawyer, an accountant, or certainly there are a lot of resources at the state level through different organizations that can help people just think through some of those issues. And most importantly, don't take out money for yourself at the sacrifice of your creditors. That's going to end up in a bad situation, and you got to really putting yourself at risk there.
Thank you. Great answer. Kathleen from New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits. You mentioned a lot of closures of nonprofits. Have there been a lot of mergers of nonprofits in the past year? And I apologize if you did mention that, but just curious.
Yeah, we haven't seen a lot of mergers. We have seen a lot of partnerships have been taking place. And as mentioned, about 7% of nonprofits responding to our wage and benefit survey said they were exploring mergers or partnerships. I think we'll continue to see organizations looking at their business models and their programs, really figuring out how they make the most impact to advance their missions and respond to changing circumstances. As has been mentioned, some of the changes that were accelerated with the pandemic are here to stay. So the nonprofit community, individually and collectively, will look different in 2023 than it did in 2019 or whatever the time frame is. So we are going to see changes. But we haven't seen a lot of wide-scale mergers at this point yet.
Interesting. And interesting that they're deciding to close rather than merge. And anyway. So this question is for Brendan from Merchants Fleet. How has technology transformed fleet management and made it more efficient?
Thank you for the question. So I'll just talk about us at Merchants Fleet. So we've invested nearly $100 million into a technology we call Total View, and we manage nearly 150,000 vehicles in that. So if you think of those 15,000 vans out making those deliveries in the month of December, where we know everything about them, we know maintenance, fuel, drivers, who's driving, we know safety, and all that's managed through our systems at the company. So that's kind of the technology that we have built, here in New Hampshire to manage fleets globally. Now, when we think of technology that's in the car, right now, there's more technology that's in the car than's actually being used in terms of data. There's a tremendous amount of data that is being produced by the car, and the fleet industry is starting to leverage that. The most obvious way that all of you will see it as consumers is route optimization. It's about speed. How do we get things to you faster? The biggest thing we're doing internally with it is driver safety, and how do we keep people safe on the road? And that's through a technology known as telematics, connected vehicle. And I always get asked about autonomous. I'm probably not as optimistic as other people. I think autonomous is far, far out. I think incremental autonomy, kind of a term that I use, is here and it's been here for a long time. In every one of your vehicles, there's incremental autonomy. Think of ABS brakes, cruise control, now lane change, and I know I've got young drivers, so I have that in there. When they try to switch lanes and there's a car, the car physically doesn't allow that. I think you're going to see incremental autonomy, but I think it's going to be a long time before that technology driving through neighborhoods. You'll see it on long hauls on highways with 18 wheelers on straight roads, but I don't see that coming anytime soon to urban areas. So thank you.
Thank you. It's funny. I was curious about how do these, like an Amazon driver, how do they know which way to head out when they've got, I don't know how many packages in a truck or vehicle, but I have a question for Lisa, and I actually have a couple of questions. And one of the things Lisa didn't touch on, but the technology that allows people with disabilities to function optimally on the job is amazing. And she could do a whole 30 minutes just on that. But my question for you today, Lisa, is what are the biggest myths employers have that get in the way of hiring someone with a disability?
Sure. Thanks, Heidi. I think the biggest one is obviously, is this person going to be some kind of a liability to me in terms of insurance, those kind of things? And my answer is always that, I think any employee that comes to us these days can be sort of a big question mark. And it isn't until you get people on the job that you get to see their skills and strengths and all that. So I would say that is probably the biggest myth, is that there's this sort of liability inherent in hiring someone with a disability, when in fact, a lot of the research shows that individuals with disabilities can sometimes be more or can be more dependable. And technology has really changed things immensely. A lot of our blind customers, I have Dan Fry on the call as well. He is head of our blind services, and it is absolutely, he can run rings around me with his iPhone, and I am not joking. And so the level of technology that our business partners like Apple and Microsoft and all of these companies are putting out, screen reading technology, they can help individuals that have any kind of disability, whether you're blind, whether you have learning disabilities, to be successful. So there's so much out there that we can tap into. If it's a small business and you can't pay for it, we can be there to do that. So again, we're trying to open doors for businesses and try and get rid of all those barriers, whether it be a myth or a perceived reality. So, hopefully we can keep marching our way through our business partners in New Hampshire.
Awesome, thank you. And Marshall, I've got a question for you, or actually a number of questions, but let's start with what I feel like no one talks about the deficit. And how does the deficit, and this is probably a 30-minute answer, but how does the deficit then affect markets? Because certainly we've been blowing up the deficit for I don't know how many years.
I think in simple terms, in the near term, the deficit does not have an impact on the financial markets. At some point in the future, it may, when interest rates start to rise, but the effective cost to the government of borrowing money is zero right now. So in the near term, federal government deficits are not a factor of particular significance to the financial markets.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. I don't have to worry about that, I guess. So unfortunately, I have a lot of questions and Matt's been direct messaging me and we are out of time. But I did want people to know that we actually take the questions that have been asked, and often Matt will use those to inform his editorial decisions down the road, and has created articles based on those questions, because clearly a business audience wants to know the answers for that. Before I just close, I also want to mention that on February 18th at 11 a.m., we're actually doing an event on resiliency. And we've got a speaker, Dr. Stuart Lustig. He is a psychiatrist and the National Medical Director from Cigna. And we'll be beaming him in from California to talk about how resiliency, especially with so many people feeling isolated and working from home, is affecting productivity. And I think every employer and HR person needs to attend this. So please, if you're unable to bring in your HR people, you can register for the event at businessnhmagazine.com. I would really like to thank our panelists for participating today. It's so informative. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much.